And we'll be announcing something very soon on pharmaceuticals that they're going to be tariffed if they have to bring the pharmaceuticals into the country, the drugs and other things into the country. They're going to be tariffed at a very, very high rate, like 200%.
On July 8th, President Trump set the stage for a monumental shift in global trade relations, one that would have profound consequences for international healthcare. Standing before his cabinet, Trump confirmed that the U.S. would soon impose pharmaceutical tariffs as high as 200% on any country that failed to bring its drug manufacturing to American soil. The move, which would include a grace period of up to 18 months, has sent shockwaves across the globe, sparking fear and uncertainty in the international healthcare system. But more than just an economic threat, this policy risks dismantling decades of international collaboration in the field of medicine and healthcare. Australia, a significant player in the global pharmaceutical market, found itself at the epicenter of this crisis. The country, which exported over $2 billion worth of pharmaceutical products to the U.S. in the past year, particularly in blood plasma and vaccines, has long been a key supplier to the American market. Yet the new tariff threat isn't about the volume of trade, it's about principle. Australia's Pharmaceutical Benefit Scheme, PBS, which forces drug companies to negotiate prices with the government before subsidies can be offered, has long been a point of contention with the U.S. pharmaceutical lobby. Now, the U.S. is using tariffs as a weapon to retaliate against Australia's price regulation model. The stakes are high for Australia, as the PBS has kept drug prices affordable for Australians, a policy that has been criticized by the U.S. pharmaceutical industry for limiting profit margins. In response to the threat, Australian Treasury Minister Jim Chalmers voiced his concern, but the government stood firm. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and his administration have refused to compromise on the PBS, asserting that bowing to U.S. demands would only lead to higher drug prices for Australian citizens. However, this situation exposes deeper fractures in the U.S.-Australia relationship. Historically, the U.S. and Australia have been staunch allies, especially in healthcare innovation. But Trump's aggressive trade policy and the looming pharmaceutical tariffs signal a new, more confrontational era in their partnership. Australia's decision to protect its PBS is not just a matter of economic strategy, it's a defense of its national healthcare system, and the U.S. seems to have little room for negotiation. While Australia faces the tariffs head-on, Canada has chosen a quieter, more strategic approach to the looming threat. Canada, another significant pharmaceutical exporter to the U.S., has thus far not received the dreaded tariff letter. Instead, the Canadian government has been focused on building domestic resilience to avoid pharmaceutical shortages, while quietly lobbying for exemptions on humanitarian grounds. Unlike Australia, which has publicly resisted, Canada is relying on behind-the-scenes negotiations, hoping to avert a full-scale trade war with its southern neighbor. This approach might seem more subtle, but it also highlights the growing tension between the two countries. Canada's pharmaceutical supply chains, which rely heavily on imports from China and India, are particularly vulnerable to the imposition of tariffs. Industry experts have warned that such tariffs could devastate Canada's ability to supply critical medications to its citizens. Health Canada has already started compiling a list of essential drugs to protect from potential shortages, while Canadian lawmakers continue to push for exemptions based on humanitarian rather than economic grounds. The situation leaves the U.S. in a precarious position. While Trump's strategy of using high tariffs to force countries into negotiating bilateral trade deals may have worked in other sectors, such as steel and automobiles, the pharmaceutical industry presents a unique challenge. The imposition of tariffs on drugs will not only hurt manufacturers, but will also have a ripple effect on hospitals, insurance systems, and ultimately, patients. This is why even U.S. senators and medical lobbyists have reportedly been urging the White House to reconsider the policy. As the August 1st deadline approaches, the world watches to see whether Trump's hardline stance will pay off or backfire. But one thing is already clear. U.S. allies, long considered partners in healthcare and global cooperation, are no longer backing down without a fight. The question now is whether the U.S. can leverage its tariffs without alienating key allies, or if this will mark the beginning of a new, more divisive chapter in international trade. As the August 1st deadline looms, the tariff threat has far-reaching implications beyond just the pharmaceutical industry. Trump's decision to apply high tariffs on countries that refuse to relocate manufacturing to the U.S. is not just an economic maneuver, it's a strategic gamble that could reshuffle global trade alliances. For decades, Japan and South Korea have been two of the United States' most reliable allies, both economically and militarily. Yet, under the new tariff regime, they are now being treated with the same aggressive tactics that Trump has used with less significant trading partners. On July 7th, President Trump escalated tensions by announcing that Japan and South Korea would face a 25% tariff on all their exports to the U.S. starting August 1st unless they opened their markets to more U.S. goods. This announcement was not a mere policy update. It was a declaration that the U.S. would no longer differentiate between close allies and geopolitical rivals when it came to trade. The tariffs sent ripples through global markets almost immediately. Major Japanese automakers like Nissan, Toyota, and Honda saw their stock prices fall significantly, while U.S. indices also dipped in response to the heightened uncertainty. While Japan and South Korea brace for the effects of these tariffs, Canada, which has not yet received a formal tariff letter, finds itself in a delicate position. The country has already engaged in trade talks with the U.S. and was hoping to avoid the pharmaceutical tariff crisis altogether. Canada's recent withdrawal of its digital services tax opened the door to negotiations, but Prime Minister Mark Carney's approach has been one of strategic restraint. Rather than making hasty concessions, Carney has focused on maintaining Canada's position as a key partner for the U.S. in broader geopolitical issues, particularly in relation to China, labor protections, and border security. Despite the pressure mounting from the U.S., Canada has chosen not to engage in public showdowns. Instead, it has quietly prepared contingency plans for industries like aluminum, which still faces high tariffs from the U.S. This quiet resistance, however, has not gone unnoticed. Investors, markets, and foreign governments are all keenly watching how the U.S.-Canada negotiations unfold. The next few weeks will reveal whether Carney's calm, calculated approach can withstand Trump's high-pressure tactics, or whether the looming tariffs will force Canada to concede. Meanwhile, China, although currently under a temporary tariff truce with the U.S., is watching the unfolding events with interest. The global trade system, in which the U.S. has long played a central role, is starting to look increasingly fractured. Trump's approach of using tariffs to force bilateral trade deals is causing rifts not only with traditional allies like Japan, South Korea, and Canada, but also with global superpowers like China. Beijing, for now, is biding its time, taking note of the divisions in the U.S. alliance system, and positioning itself to potentially benefit from the fallout. As Trump continues to push his America First agenda, the consequences of his tariff-heavy diplomacy are starting to become clear. The strategy may yield short-term gains, but it also risks isolating the U.S. from the very countries it has long considered allies. With global markets in turmoil, Japan, South Korea, Canada, and China are recalculating their strategies, and the very nature of international diplomacy is shifting in real time. The coming weeks will determine whether Trump's gamble will lead to successful trade deals, or whether his tactics will irreparably damage the U.S. global relationships. But one thing is certain, the stakes are higher than ever, and the world is watching to see if America's aggressive tariff diplomacy will come at the expense of long-standing alliances. As the deadline looms, the world will watch closely to see how this trade war unfolds. Will the U.S. achieve its goals through sheer pressure and coercion, or will it be forced to reassess its approach as allies begin to push back? The next few weeks will determine the fate of Trump's tariff strategy and the future of America's role in a shifting global trade order. For now, Carney's calculated silence speaks volumes, and it may very well be the key to reshaping the future of U.S.-Canada relations, as well as the broader geopolitical landscape. The question remains, who will blink first? Time will tell, but it's clear that the stakes have never